So if I'm here at the top and I want to feel these things, I'm going to feel my lead wrist working towards bow, or kind of feeling like maybe my logo of the glove.
It's pointing away.
Yeah, kind of more back towards the camera. Maybe I feel my knuckles kind of pointing more back towards the camera, fingernails, something little like that might work. In terms of my trail wrist,
you feel like you're extending it to the max.
Yeah, like I'm kind of getting this back of my hand back to my forearm.
You're trying to get it to touch. It won't.
It's
not going to get there, but that's what you're feeling.
Extended. So here's the difference between here, no good, and my right wrist being extended all the way back, right? A little bit different. All right, Milo, thanks for having us back out here, my friend. Been a pleasure.
Oh, it's been awesome.
And so we're going to talk in today's video, as we've been talking, about how to start the downswing, right? And in this one, about how the arms and hands work. I know that at the top of the backswing, and you know too, and everyone knows, players can be in different positions.
Yeah.
But there's a couple things that we can say kind of in general good players will do across the board. Then there's going to be some little nuances. To start with, what would be one thing you see across the board with good players that kind of across, generally speaking, they most all do?
So generally speaking, in transition, you're going to see their wrists working in a similar direction.
Yep.
So, everybody's got a different grip, and so that creates a little different structure at the top.
Yep.
But depending on the grip, you might have a little cupping or you might have a little bowing, but from there, everybody's going to be gaining more flexion in the, so relatively speaking, more flexion in the lead wrist and more extension in the trail wrist.
I love that, and certainly we've seen that measured, right? Yeah. And then we see that in video. Before we dive into some of the other pieces and how to do that, let's just take a quick look at what some good players do in terms of that at the top of their backswing to start the downswing. One of the keys from the top of the backswing to start the downswing is going to be the wrist angle. So if we take a look here, just at a few simple examples, we're going to look at the lead wrist angle, kind of relative to the forearm, and the trail wrist, or how bent back that trail wrist is. And the general idea is going to be, as the transition and downswing happens, that angle of that right wrist is going to go from the angle that it's currently out, however much it's bent back, and it's going to bend back more. So that trail wrist being closer, the back of the trail hand being closer to the forearm, would be the movement pattern we're looking at here. And also the angle of the lead wrist relative to the forearm, and how that will just, and we're talking small amounts here, just slight increase in the amount of flexion. The lead wrist working more towards bow, left wrist working more towards flexion, and the right wrist bending back more in transition. Those are the pieces that we're talking about in terms of the wrist angles. Now let's talk, Milo, a little bit about the grip differences in wrist conditions. Let's keep it simple and call it like 3 types of grips.
So I'll start with strong.
Yeah.
So a strong grip, something along those lines. Generally at the top of the backswing, if we see a face that's fairly square, we're going to see some
extension there.
Some extension in that, or cupping, as some would say, in that wrist. Okay. If we go more neutral, to have a square face, we're going to have the wrist closer to flat.
Yep, got it.
Okay. And if we're a weak grip, get the face square, you're going to have some bow or some flexion.
And so when you're at the top of those different grips, obviously where your lead wrist can be in different spots, where it's going to be coming down can be a little different, but the movement that's happening will be this. So let's start with a neutral grip.
Okay.
Let's say you took a neutral grip to the top and you go up to the top and pause. Now, to start the downswing with the hands with a neutral grip, what's going to happen with the lead wrist?
The lead wrist is going to work that direction.
Right. So that's working towards a flexion, working towards flexion,
yes,
right?
Working toward flexion.
That doesn't mean it's in flexion or is bowed. It's from wherever it is towards that way, right?
Yes, it's getting more flexed.
Got it, yeah, perfect. And let's do that one more time. So with a neutral grip, if this is flat and then working towards being bowed or flexed, because we hold it with 2 hands, that also means something's going to happen with the trail wrist, right?
So it's getting more extended.
More extended or more bent back.
Yes.
And then if we take, let's go strong grip model. So kind of overly turned. Let's say they're a little extended, overextended at the top. Now, and I'm just going to make up shit here. Let's say this is 30 degrees in extension, whatever that is. All we're saying is it's going to lose some of that. It's going to work towards flexion. So it might still be in 15 degrees as you work down, but it's lost some of that.
Yes.
It's worked towards the flexion part.
Exactly.
And same thing with the trail hand, right?
Exactly.
And then if we have the weak model, where we're kind of bowed already at the top, same sort of thing. It's already flex, but it's going to go in more in flexion as you work down, more bent back with the trail wrist.
Yes.
And so I think the point being, it's a little bit dependent in terms of the grip, where you're going to be, but more or less across the board for good ball strikers, how to start the downswing is you want to work more towards the bow flexion and more towards the extension of the trail wrist.
Which tends to strengthen the face and makes it easier for you to do all the other things we want to do.
Life is good. Let me hop in there for a sec, Milo. And let's say I have a neutral grip to start with.
Okay.
And I'm at the top and I don't do those things. Let's say I work more towards cup or extension of the lead wrist. We know the shaft's going to be more vertical, face more
is
open,
be more open.
Nothing good coming out of this. But let's say I do that. My right wrist gets flat, my lead wrist gets extended, and I say, all right, Milo, I get it. I want to be neutral. What do I do? How do I do that? What do I feel?
You feel the opposite drastically.
Okay. Oh, okay. So you feel the opposite, right, of what you're currently doing, and you exaggerate it 900 million times more than you think.
Yes.
Until you hit neutral. Okay. I might have said that once or twice before. I love that feedback. So if I'm here at the top and I want to feel these things, I'm going to feel my lead wrist working towards bow, or kind of feeling like maybe my logo of the glove.
It's pointing away.
Yeah, kind of more back towards the camera. Maybe I feel my knuckles kind of pointing more back towards the camera, fingernails, something little like that might work. In terms of my trail wrist,
You
whatever.
feel like you're extending it to the max.
Yeah, like I'm kind of getting this back of my hand back to my forearm.
You're trying to get it to touch. It won't.
It won't,
It's not going to get there, but that's what you're feeling.
Extended. So here's the difference between here, no good, and my right wrist being extended all the way back, right? A little bit different. So really, I'm going to feel some of that happening as I begin my downswing.
Yes.
Right? Feeling a little bit of that if I'm the player who goes a little bit this way. We already did some videos talking about, hey, from the top, we really want to see the lower body movement, the upper body, etc. That's still all in play here.
Still all in play. And if that stuff is in place and your hands are not tense, most of what's happening with the club should kind of happen on its own also.
And I think across the board with this stuff, if you do it right, a lot of the boxes get checked without you having to think about it. And then what the player needs to do is work with a coach like you and say, hey, within these, oh, your issue is this. Hey, let's address that specifically. All that other stuff still applies, right? But if I'm coming down for whatever reason and I have this tendency, a lot of this other stuff's gonna be harder to do as well.
Yeah, you won't do it.
Right, okay. That's even better, even better said. So as I start here and I'm gonna do some of these, I'm gonna feel my lead wrist working a little bit towards flexing. I prefer the trail wrist bent back feels, personally, but I'm gonna feel like that increases a little bit in transition. And let's see if I can, I'm gonna skip the 75 yarder and see if I can go maybe 100 to 130 here. So lead wrist flexing, trail wrist bent. I feel like the back of my hand is bending back towards my forearm. Let's just do a little half one here. Yeah, and that feels strong. And how I personally know, Milo, when I'm doing this stuff, that I did that well, is that ball hooked more than normal based on my release pattern, which is based on a face that's more neutral. And what I like about this, I know enough to keep doing that and then kind of get things more passive with the other pieces. But that to me was a nice sign that I actually did that. Same pieces here, lead wrist more towards flex, right wrist more bent back as I begin my downswing pieces. Let's go ahead and do one more of those. Yeah, the same thing again, that feels really strong. And for anyone certainly who has a face or shaft that's out of position, they would feel those exaggerations just to get the ball, you know, kind of more towards straight.
Yeah, generally.
Yeah. So that's the arms and hands part. Now let's pause for a sec and let's talk a little bit about some of the other factors of where the arms and hands might be and how that affects the downswing. All right, Milo, so risk conditions there in part one. Let's talk a little bit about the depth, or where the hands and the butt of the club are at the top, and how that'll affect things on the way down.
Perfect.
And so if we look at it like, let's say, neutral, deep, Neutral is one option, deep as another option, and maybe like someone who's super vertical.
Okay.
So let's say someone who's deep.
So
right?
deep would be someone like probably Rory McIlroy,
Perfect.
where at the top of the backswing, the butt end of the golf club is behind their heels.
Yeah, right, right.
Well, that player, naturally, their hand path's going to work more out here in front of them, or it's going to need to.
Yep.
If they want a neutral ball flight.
Yep, exactly.
The player who's more neutral, grip of the club, kind of somewhere between the heels and the arch of the foot.
Yep.
Their hand path, they'll still move out and work out in front of them, but it won't have to be quite as drastic feeling.
Yep.
Out in front. And the player who's very vertical, like a Dustin Johnson or a Bubba Watson, you're going to almost see their hands working this way as they turn. So
Yep.
it's like their hands are making a loop.
And so if we look at that, and a lot of that, like the deep player, right? The Rory type of guy who gets the butt of the club super deep, and that butt of the club, if it goes back this way farther, has to come back this way farther, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of that's going to be happening from the body turn.
Most of it happens because of how the player turns the body.
Yeah.
Because the body turning moves the hands back out where you want them.
So a player who got really deep on the way back probably had a lot of body turn on the way back.
Yeah, most likely.
And so they're going to have a lot, they're going to need more on the way through,
Yep.
right, to get back to neutral. The player who goes vertical kind of with or without the body turn, because you go vertical with a lot of
You
turn.
can go a lot of turn and go way vertical like a Bubba Watson.
And you're still going to have the body motions to start back down, but that lead arm and butt of the club obviously are going to work a little different.
They're going to be, yeah, if I'm real vertical here like a Bubba Watson, or as I come down, you can see my hands are actually going this, if I didn't turn,
Yeah.
my hands are actually going this way to come down.
Yeah. And I think a good way to think about it, can you go up to the top one more time, Milo? Just neutral.
Neutral?
If we say as a stock swing, I drew like a circle here, and I was like, hey, the butt of the club's going to get back to here on the way down. Well, if it's back here, it's still going to get in this circle, but to get there, it's got to go out. And if you're super vertical, it's still going to get in this circle, but it's got to go back a little to get to that.
Yeah.
It's still kind of the same checkpoints of where it should be,
Yeah.
but they get there in different fashions. And then obviously we talked about the risk conditions that go along with that. So I don't think a bunch of drills here for this. I think a general understanding of wherever you are coming from, you got to kind of match up the downswing pieces to that.
Exactly.